Bless her heart. Tom, am I right that if you say her heart, his heart, before almost anything, then you can tell the truth? And that's really all you could say about Hattie Simmons Wagoner. Bless her heart. Some people would say she was wealthy, but she'd do everything she could to, bless her heart, convince you she's really quite poor. And bless her heart, was she ever stingy? Hattie would defend, I'm frugal. But even the Girl Scouts knew to keep it moving when they went past that big yellow house. And she complained bitterly about being cold at church. But when anyone suggested she might help pay for a new boiler, she said that was a luxury and that people needed to learn how to get by. Bless her heart. Hattie was lonely. She had no children, and her husband had died years ago, and he had made sure she would be taken care of very comfortably, and that big yellow house was hers, free and clear, inherited from his side of the family. But perhaps her biggest problem was that she had achieved so few of her dreams and was jealous of those who seemed to have all they wanted. She had said, by the time I'm 60, I'm going to see a Broadway play and travel to Europe and dance with Baryshnikov. And the first two she totally could have done. But it wouldn't have played into her carefully defined frugal identity, and so she just stayed at home and grew more bitter and, bless her heart, more unpleasant to be around. And while she sat at home all alone, she stewed about what to do with her big yellow house when she died. She kept putting off a decision until one day she was in a car accident and she recovered, but she was hit by the harsh reality that she wouldn't live forever, and so she forced herself to sit down and finally begin to write her will. I, Hattie Simmons Wagoner, being of sound mind, instruct my lawyer, Harold Claiborne, to draw my last will and testament upon the following terms. She hesitated. She lifted the pencil from the page and started again thinking about all the things she had and who in her life deserved them, especially as she watched other people get what she wanted. Why is it never me? She turned back to her will and she continued. I, Hattie Simmons Wagoner, upon the following terms, leave this property, land, house, garden, water rights, all of it to me, Hattie Simmons Wagoner. In her hour of decision, all she could imagine was leaving everything to herself. Bless her heart. Bless her wounded, hurting heart. And in the story Jesus told of the widow with only 2 coins, she couldn't imagine doing anything than giving everything she had to God. Bless her heart. Bless her generous, sacrificial heart, and she is to be praised, and wow, worthy of praise, even though I'm not sure that's exactly what Jesus intended. Because you see, the story of the widow begins, as Jesus taught, he looked around and said, beware of the scribes who like to walk around in long robes. Eugene Peterson describes them so colorfully, preening in the radiance of public flattery, basking in prominent positions, demanding to sit at the head table of every function. Beware of them. They devour widows' houses, and for the sake of appearance say long prayers. And let me tell you, the longer the prayer, the worse it gets. All the while, exploiting the weak and helpless. And then Jesus offered an example. Whenever Jesus told parables or wise sayings, it was often because he saw something. You see over there? You see that guy planting wheat? Or you see that man that's lying beside the road begging? Well, he'd say, let me tell you a story. Do I need to use the other mic? Shall we try yellow? Okay. All right. Well, they say, let me tell you a story. And so in this story, Jesus saw a concrete example of his warning. You see that widow over there putting coins in the temple treasury. What was it that I was telling you? She's one of those widows whose house was devoured, but bless her heart, out of nothing, out of absolutely nothing. While some people gave something, she just gave everything. Jesus made this observation as one of many in a long litany of hypocrisies that he had observed among the various religious authorities. Because you know what? It was only the day before the widow that Jesus famously drove the money changers out of the temple and turned over the table of those selling doves. That was Monday. This was Tuesday, which kind of puts the widow's story in a pretty clear context. And you know, it wasn't that Jesus disapproved of buying and selling in the courtyard of the temple. I mean, it was a necessary thing for those traveling to Jerusalem from everywhere around. No, his disgust was pointed directly at those who tried to make an unreasonable profit. That's why Jesus quoted the prophet Isaiah saying, "Isn't my house supposed to be a house of prayer for all people?" And that's why they sold doves. It was so all people, including the poor, could afford to make an acceptable sacrifice as opposed to a more expensive fatted calf or lamb or so forth. But these sellers had grossly inflated their cost. So you imagine a dove costs a penny, but they sold it for 99 cents, pocketing the excess proceeds. And so Jesus answered his own question by quoting the prophet Jeremiah. "You have turned my house into a den of robbers, a hideout for crooks, a hangout for thieves." And then he pointed over there and said, you know, like those guys who like to walk around in long robes demanding respect. Instead of the noble work of providing a service so that people could afford, so the temple could be, in fact, a place of prayer for all people. And so Jesus protested this by overturning the tables and running out the money changers because they were not selling. They were exploiting the vulnerability of the poor. So again, that's Monday. It's Tuesday, and he looks over and he sees this widow putting 2 coins into the temple treasury. And you know, a few days later, they concluded they needed to kill this agitator or Jesus would ruin their business. Wow, that's a different spin. And we thought the widow and the coins was just a perfect example of stewardship. And it is, but it's so much more. I think it's also the stewardship of privilege. Using what we have to make a difference in the lives of those most vulnerable among us, including using our voice. For widows whose house was devoured, how do we serve the most vulnerable among us today? And Jesus always tries to help us imagine a different way. That's what Jesus was trying to do all along. You know, when he's talking about the kingdom of God, like how he's talking about animating the power of loving our neighbors as much as we love ourselves. And to imagine, what would it mean to liberate the oppressed? What would it mean to set captives free? What would it mean for all the widows, orphans, immigrants, families, and everyone else to have what they needed? Because let's quote from the book of James, right? Religion that is pure and undefiled. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. Unstained is like, what? unstained by the world, like taken in by greed, desiring a lust for power over what serves the common good. So imagine if Hattie Simmons Wagoner, bless her heart, had given her house to an organization, for example, that helped prisoners re-enter society. You know, a place to live while they got their affairs in order and prepared them to live successfully. Or she could give her house to an organization that provides a place for young people when the foster system tells 18-year-olds, you're old enough now to handle the world on your own. Perhaps giving it to a church who could use it to provide affordable housing for low-income seniors. You know, the ideas and possibilities are almost endless when we look beyond ourselves. And foster youth came to mind as I was writing because on Thursday night, we once again hosted the annual Thanksgiving party for participants in the organization Just in Time for Foster Youth. We've heard some of their horrific experiences in foster care. And Just in Time is there just in time when they turn 18, all the way until they're 27, to help turn those stories into strength and endurance and success. And their testimonials of doing that are beyond inspiring. And so on Thursday, before their feast of ham and turkey, they invited me to offer a blessing, to say a prayer. I told the tables of amazing young people that it was such an honor to be asked to give them a blessing, but that they didn't need my blessing. They're already blessed. Your power is already in you, and you just need to use it. You have so much to give. You can unleash all of this upon the world. And as I was talking to them, at first they were a little confused. Why was I up there then? Curious. But I saw them get it. I saw them nodding their heads and later hearing that they actually felt blessed by being reminded. You know, what happened to them shouldn't have happened. But that's not their end. And the widow shouldn't have been left with only 2 coins. But she didn't see that as her end. She didn't see them as having too little to do anything. She saw all the power that comes from giving. And I don't know what Hattie Simmons Wagoner ultimately decided to do with her big yellow house. I just pray that at some point she didn't just see the dreams she didn't fulfill, but all the power that house she owned had. Contribute to a world where someone didn't feel as alone as she did. And in the best sense of the word, bless her heart. Right now, many of us are feeling kind of insignificant, like all we've got is 2 small coins. Feeling a little helpless, a little small. What can we possibly do to protect widows and others? But in the immediacy of this moment, we can still make change, particularly in each other's lives. In a world with too many people sitting home now feeling bitter and alone, well, look around here. Look around here and see this abundance and recognize the extraordinary opportunity and privilege we have in this place, in this room, right now. You ever feel a little like there's nothing more I can do? You're not alone. You have a place to belong. And a place, in fact, to literally serve widows and orphans and immigrants and neighbors in need. You have a place to literally do this. Who else needs that? Who else in your life needs that? Why don't you invite them to come along? listen to them and then bring them here to imagine what would happen if we put all that power together. And that's when we're church.